West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight with the people of New York versus Donald Trump. Today was an historic day in Lower Manhattan as America learned the full extent of the allegations against the former president. And we got a look at criminal defendant Trump in photos that will live in infamy. The first American president to be charged with a crime, defendant Donald J. Trump, is seen here surrounded by his legal team, a photo Trump most certainly did not want you to see. It's nothing short of a remarkable image of the new reality for the man who raged in all caps on social media ahead of his day in court before surrendering for arrest and processing in Manhattan criminal court. Trump was uncharacteristically grim and silent while entering the courtroom, ignoring questions from reporters before pleading not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. The now unsealed indictment lays out the 34 counts in the form of numerous entries made with, quote, intent to defraud and intent to commit another crime and aid and conceal the commission thereof. The indictment isn't explicit about those other crimes that Trump tried to conceal, but it is laid out clearly in the prosecutor's statement of facts as a scheme involving Trump and America Media Incorporated CEO David Pecker, noting that in June 2015, defendant Trump announced his candidacy for president, and soon after, in August 2015, met with lawyer A, Michael Cohen, and Pecker at Trump Tower. At that meeting, Pecker agreed to help with the defendant's campaign, saying that he would act as the eyes and ears of the campaign by looking out for negative stories about the defendant and alerting lawyer A, Cohen, before the stories were published. The AMI CEO also agreed to publish negative stories about the defendant's competitors for the election. The broader scheme played out in three parts. First, a payoff to a Trump Tower doorman, alleging in November 2015, the AMI CEO learned that a former Trump Tower doorman was trying to sell information regarding a child that the defendant had allegedly fathered out of wedlock. At the CEO's direction, AMI negotiated and signed an agreement to pay the doorman $30,000 to acquire exclusive rights to the story. The second part, suppressing woman one, presumably Playboy playmate Karen McDougal. Quote, the defendant, the AMI CEO and lawyer A, had a series of discussions about who should pay off woman one to secure her silence. AMI ultimately paid $150,000 to woman one in exchange for her agreement not to speak out about the alleged sexual relationship. Prosecutors say, quote, the defendant did not want this information to become public because he was concerned about the effect it could have on his candidacy. In other words, it was clearly intended to influence the 2016 election. Then there's the third part, the hush money payment to buy Stormy Daniels' silence after the release of the Access Hollywood tape in October 2016. Quote, with pressure mounting and the election approaching, the defendant agreed to the payoff and directed Cohen to proceed. Cohen discussed the deal with the defendant and Trump Organization's CFO, Alan Weisselberg. The defendant Trump did not want to make the $130,000 payment himself and asked Cohen and Weisselberg to find a way to make the payment. The final part of the scheme, prosecutors say Trump arranged to reimburse Cohen for the payoff that he made on Trump's behalf, saying Cohen submitted 10 similar monthly invoices by email to the Trump Organization for the remaining months in 2017. Each invoice falsely stated that it was being submitted pursuant to the retainer agreement and falsely requested payment for services rendered for a month of 2017. Well, in fact, there was no such retainer agreement. And lawyer A, Cohen, was not being paid for services rendered in any month of 2017. After the twice impeached former president's arraignment, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg addressed reporters about the importance of pursuing the case against Trump.
Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct. We have a distinct and strong, I would say profound, independent interest in New York State. This is the business capital of the world. We regularly do cases involving false business statements.
For Trump, the ultimate indignity is that he got away with the Access Hollywood tape politically, but he will now have to pay for it legally at the hands of Manhattan prosecutors and the people of the state of New York. Joining me now is Hugo Lowell, political investigations reporter for The Guardian, who was in the courtroom today for Trump's arraignment. Katie Phang, attorney and host of The Katie Phang Show on MSNBC. And Charles Coleman Jr., former Brooklyn prosecutor, civil rights attorney, and MSNBC legal analyst. Thank you all for being here. Hugo, I am very excited to hear from you. Please talk about the atmosphere in the court today, what you saw, and specifically what you observed about Donald Trump today.
It was extremely tense. When we got to the courtroom, there was probably about 20 court security officers, probably around 5 to 10 Secret Service officers, and we were waiting for a while. And first, the prosecution team walked in, and then Trump's defense counsel walked in. And then Trump walked in. And when Trump came into the courtroom, he looked particularly angry, visibly shaken, and the most gaunt that I've seen him. And it was really striking. I've never seen him look so, I guess, afraid, and I've never seen him look so serious as he did today. And it was striking how all of this was on his face, even as he showed no discernible emotion throughout proceedings. And I think principally it was the result of him walking into the courtroom, being read the criminal charges, and that actually hitting him. You know, we spoke to advisors when he learned about the indictment, and he was kind of hit then. But when he actually walked into the courtroom, I think he was hit to a whole new degree, and the gravity of the moment really sunk in.
And just to stay with you for a moment, Hugo, I mean, you have covered Donald Trump. You've covered him at Trump Tower. You've covered him at Mar-a-Lago. What you're describing is a very different Donald Trump than the one that, you know, people who watched The Apprentice or watched him as president experienced.
No, this is a man who is excellent at being performative, about being the star of his own show. And he has been talking for weeks about how he wanted to be the star of his own show this time too. You know, he was talking about how he wanted to be handcuffed and, with all this bravado about how he wanted his hand specifically behind his back and should I smile for the cameras and, I want to be a martyr. But when it actually came to the moment, he was really drawn, he was really gaunt. And there was none of the performative stuff that you saw kind of in the lead up to this arraignment. Once he made his way into the courtroom where there were no TV cameras and there were only the photographers at the start, that was the tone that he set, and that was the demeanor that he had, and I've never seen anything like it.
Let me come to the table for a moment, because, back to attorneys here, it's like when they say in boxing, you really don't know anything until you get punched in the face. Mm-hmm. Then you really find out which God you serve, right? You find things out. And I mean, Donald Trump has, for his entire life, had someone fixing things for him. He always had a fixer.
He always wanted a Roy Cohn, right?
He had a Roy Cohn.
Yep.
He had Michael Cohen. He had Alan Weisselberg. He's always had someone to fix it. So even for Donald Trump, who's gotten away arguably with committing a few crimes in his time over the course of his life, suddenly it's different when you're in court.
Think about it this way, Joy. You're talking about someone who went through a Mueller investigation. Nothing happened. You went through an impeachment number 1. Nothing happened. You went through impeachment number 2. Nothing happened. All of these formal proceedings that have taken place have not led to any actual consequence. But during each of those, you still had the status to be in control of the institutions that were investigating you. You still had a certain level of power over the people who were making the decisions. Now you are not in that arena anymore. You are in an arena where you have no control. You can't control the narrative. You can't control the actors, and you can't control the system. And so those are new things for Donald Trump to experience. And the fact that he is a litigant in myriad civil cases has nothing to do with this, because this is a space where you will lose your freedom.
It is Wednesday, the 5th of April of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? No one. And yes, it is a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce, so don't think anything untoward, please. Though we have many entendres, okay? You know where that drift is going. Speaking of drift, I don't know why I do this. I do, but I feel compelled to say it anyway. I don't know why I do this. Speaking of drift. Yes, we're just drifting along. Hey, quite a spectacle yesterday, huh? Yeah. Well, that was okay. I suppose because, these things haven't really happened in our body politic on this capacity. We've had many politicians go down for any number of things that Trump seems to have done quite a few of them. Usually you have a politician who does one or two things, that seem really untoward, of a particular kind of MO. But this guy, stealing top secrets from the nuclear department. Yeah, sell them to whoever. Sell them back to the presidential archives. He thought he was going to get $18 million. I'm not going to let that. I'm going to flog that horse. Let's just put it that way. Same way that I've been flogging the fact that, hey, Bush is still a war criminal. I don't care. Oh, you can't take him to The Hague? Well, there's a reason why he doesn't go pick tulips in Denmark. There's a reason. Anyway, this guy actually got arrested. He was shocked. It was something that he thought was not really part of his teleplay. Remember those? Remember when it was called a teleplay? There was screenplays, and then there were teleplays. And then in musical theater, there was the book. Anyway, this was not part of his fantasy. What? Delusion. I think maybe self-delusion is the more apt understanding of what is going on here. He was reported to have asked, "You're really going to arrest me?" Yeah. Now put your little fingers. Oh no, we have to go get the kids' fingerprint pad. Hey Charlie, go get the little kid's fingerprint pad. The normal ones just. Yeah. Yeah, it'll smudge. We need smaller squares. Okay, thanks. All right. They had to get the little kids' fingerprint pad because they fingerprint kids, or they have the capacity to, and they've been doing it since, well, I don't know, delinquents from the early 1900s or before. This guy never grew up. Look at his hands. All right. I guess he would have been in one of those black and white movies with the little street urchins. He would have been the top street urchin. Yeah. Richie Rich, street urchin. And then he goes home to his high-rise to his parents, gets all cleaned up, has I don't know, a baked Alaska, because that's what he wants. I want a baked Alaska, otherwise you go to the cornfield. And they all let him do it, get away with it. He had an older brother, but his older brother had feelings. And apparently in that family, in that immediate nuclear family, that was not what you were supposed to have. Feelings. You have empathy and concern for another human being. What kind of person are you? You weak-willed mofo. You want to help people? We don't help anybody around here. Yeah, because they're grifters and they take. And the grifters always hate their marks. Because it makes it easier to take their money. Yes, I studied a few psychology, or took a few psychology classes. Not that, I took a few culinary classes too. But I am a titled chef. I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but I know a little bit about Jung, don't you? Doesn't everybody? Not anymore, apparently. Oh, yeah. Came across a young person that's drifting towards MAGA land, gamer type, I guess like an Instagram influencer, maybe, getting on the tweets and getting on the Spoutables, or I don't know, maybe she's not on Spoutable, but I came across this person who thinks that the British followed whatever it was, who were Americans, the first Americans, and they weren't the American Indian. No. They were some amorphous European Brit that, no, they weren't even Brits. They were Americans. They were just, I don't know, they were put on this earth by God as Americans, set foot finally on America somehow. And then England followed them to try to take the land away from them. It was just the most, I have no idea what kind of homeschooling bullshit this girl got. And I say girl because she's probably, 22. Maybe. I'm sorry. If she showed any inkling of any understanding of anything, I might elevate her to womanhood. But in this instance, I don't know. She's a girl. Excuse me. In other words, they need to grow up. Sit down, take a civics class, and stop. I don't know, it was the most astounding lack of knowledge that I know. And then with that, some weird construct about the timeline even of how events occurred. Or how they could have occurred even in any kind of physical world that exists outside of this young person's mind. Then they want to make policy out of that affects all the rest of us. I am sorry. I am not going to relinquish whatever it is that we have to that. No way. Overeducated my ass. There's no such thing as being overeducated. Remember when they talk, oh, you're just overeducated. Really? Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm adaptable then. God, give me a break. Oh, you're only supposed to be putting the wooden dowel into that hole, and that's all you get to do. You don't get to round the edges. What? I was talking about making a door or a table, without any metal. Did you know that Japanese tea houses are made with no metal? Everything is wood joinery. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to do it in a true authentic manner, you manufacture on site all those wooden dowels and bore out all the little cavities that you're going to slam those wooden dowels in. Yeah, that's fun. Anyway, how did we get to that? Well, I'll tell you how we got to that, because we're all over the world, even in Japan today. We are everywhere because that's what we do. We're the salon that considers whatever is happening in the universe, not just restricted to this plane of existence. I mean, after all, there were some amorphous Americans that existed in space, but they weren't the American Indian. But they somehow came upon this continent, and all of the European travails and problems befell upon our patriots. And then our patriots kicked them out because they were invaders. I don't know. I was under the impression that America is pretty much England. Okay. Why else were they called colonists? You can't make this stuff up. I don't know. Maybe this is the new Ridgemont High. Maybe. I'm even older than Ridgemont High, and so are you. And since that's the case, oh yes, indeed, we should then fill you in on what is in store for you here in this salon that, we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Yeah, Trump got away with the Access Hollywood tape politically, but he's now paying for it legally because freedom is just another word when you've got nothing left to lose. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, Hawaii lawmakers are considering legislation that would require tourists to pay for a year-long license to visit state parks. The state of Washington has purchased a 3-year supply of abortion pills ahead of the court ruling out of Amarillo, Texas. And still reeling from a weekend of deadly weather, the risk of severe storms persists from Texas to the Great Lakes. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where images from inside the Fukushima nuclear power plant has triggered concerns about the reactor's safety. After all this time, I don't think it's getting better. And Italy is rallying international support for another attempt to build a bridge to Sicily. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Over across from that chat room link to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. I cannot tell you, and I always do. Anyway, about how much it does help when people help. So thank you for your help. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so, and also at Mastodon and Spoutable. Follow Netroots Radio at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Spoutable, and Mastodon at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary, and also I get the podcast diary up on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime, though the podcast diary comes after. But anyway, you know what I mean. The show notes and links can be found by getting to that diary at Daily Codes. And if you follow me on those platforms, you can easily access Daily Codes, at least my page, my diary. Okay. All right. So that said, you can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. I wanted to mention that I took my mother yesterday to get her labs. And, of course, you know that she had congenital heart failure a little bit ago. And we got her home and trying to get her on a road to recovery and whatnot. But so she's on oxygen and needs a bit more hands-on care. So took her for her labs. And the good news is that when we got back from the labs later on in the day, because we did it in the morning after she had seen her physical therapist who comes in, regardless of all that, we got the results of the labs in that the doctor who we had seen because her own primary, I say our because I take care of Mom, her primary wasn't available when we went in to have the follow-up for her release from the hospital from her heart failure incident. And this fellow, who we had seen, was very thorough and knowledgeable. He's an internal medicine specialist, so he's around the heart a bit and the lungs, and so he knows a few things. But he was very accessible in that he would call us up at 9:30 at night to tell us that, I got to modify what I told you earlier because I got some labs here and we need to do things drastically different. Anyway, got a message from him that Mom's renal issues and her potassium levels are improving. So that is such good news. We're getting her up and about a bit more, and she's gaining some strength and confidence, and that's what we want. Now, the bad thing, to put it mildly, that we experienced yesterday is that it being the first day, apparently, that you don't have to wear a mask in a medical facility. You don't have to. You can, but you don't have to. We went into the clinic, and even people waiting in line to get their COVID shots, no one was wearing a mask. Not one person. No worker. We didn't see a doctor. We just saw the people drawing blood for the labs. You'd think that they would want to wear a mask, but that's just me. We wore masks when we went into the ER and ICU way back in the day, back in the 70s. We wore masks in any kind of environment where there was a respiratory issue. Give me a break. I guess COVID is over, even though thousands are dying a day. All right. Well, as the ladies who were drawing the blood said, it just feels so good not to have to wear a mask after 3 years. Yeah, okay. Well, do it at the beach. I don't like wearing clothes, but, I'm going to wear them around here. It's kind of cold. It's kind of nice to, go to the beach, not have to wear as many clothes. I'm sorry. Wear a mask. You don't have to wear a mask, but you can. All right. I suspect the doctors are going to be wearing masks. Trust me. All right, that stated, let us now get into what we have in store for you as our first offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it comes from Audrey McAvoy from the Associated Press. Repairing coral reefs after boats run aground, shielding native forest trees from a killer fungus outbreak, patrolling waters for swimmers, harassing dolphins and turtles. Taking care of Hawaii's unique natural environment takes time, people, and money. Now the state wants tourists to help pay for it, especially because growing numbers are traveling to the islands to enjoy the beauty of its outdoors, including some lured by dramatic vistas they've seen on social media. All I want to do, honestly, is to make travelers accountable and have the capacity to help pay for the impact they have done, Democratic Governor Josh Green said earlier this year. We get between 9 and 10 million visitors a year, but we only have 1.4 million people living here. Those 10 million travelers should be helping us sustain our environment. Hawaii lawmakers are considering legislation that would require tourists to pay for a year-long license or pass to visit state parks and trails. They're still debating how much they would charge. The governor campaigned last year on a platform of having all tourists pay a $50 fee to enter the state. Legislators think this would violate the U.S. constitutional protections for free travel and have promoted their parks and trails approach instead. Either policy would be a first of its kind of any U.S. state. Now, Hawaii's leaders are following the example of tourism hotspots that have imposed similar fees or taxes like Venice, Italy, and Ecuador's Galapagos Islands. The Pacific island nation of Palau, for example, charges arriving international passengers $100 to help it manage a sprawling marine sanctuary and promote ecotourism. State Representative Sean Kinlan, a Democrat who chairs the House Tourism Committee, said changing traveler patterns are one reason behind Hawaii's push. He said golf rounds per visitor per day have declined 30% over the past decade, while hiking has increased by 50%. People are also seeking out once obscure sites that they've seen someone post on social media, and the state does not have the money to manage all those places. Bowman of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Washington State has purchased a 3-year supply of a leading abortion medication in anticipation of a court ruling that could limit its availability, Governor Jay Inslee said yesterday, Tuesday. The Democratic governor said he ordered the Department of Corrections, which has a pharmacy license, to buy 30,000 doses of the generic version of mifepristone at a cost of about $1.28 million or $42.50 per pill. The shipment arrived in late March. A 2-pill combination of mifepristone and misoprostol is the most common form of abortion in the U.S. Research shows that medication-induced abortions are safe and effective. They were approved by the FDA over 20 years ago. The awaited ruling in a Texas lawsuit bought by a Christian group in the wake of the U.S. Supreme Court decision last year to strip away the constitutional right to end a pregnancy would affect states where abortion is legal as well as those that outlaw it. This Texas lawsuit is a clear and present danger to patients and providers all across the country, Inslee said in a statement. Washington will not sit by idly and risk the devastating consequences of inaction. Former President Donald Trump appointed Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk heard debate in March over Alliance Defending Freedom's request to revoke or suspend the FDA's approval of mifepristone. The conservative group claims it was improperly approved. Kacsmaryk said he would rule as soon as possible without giving any clear indication of how he might decide. The bulk purchase also comes as Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson pursues the issue from another angle. He's helping to lead a multi-state lawsuit in federal court to further ease restrictions to the medication. The lawsuit, filed with Oregon Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum in February against the FDA, accuses it of singling out mifepristone for excessively burdensome regulation, despite evidence that the drug is safer than Tylenol. The lawsuit asks the court to find certain FDA restrictions unlawful and to stop the federal agency from enforcing or applying them to mifepristone. Federidge and Sean Murphy of the AP bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A tornado that tore through southeastern Missouri today caused widespread destruction and killed and injured multiple people, authorities said. The tornado moved through a rural area of Ballinger County, about 50 miles south of St. Louis. That was between 3:30 and 4 a.m. this morning local time. Sergeant Clark Parrott of the Missouri State Highway Patrol said. He said it caused multiple injuries and multiple deaths. He did not say how many or precisely where they occurred. He said a search and rescue operation is underway that involves multiple agencies. Crews are having to use chainsaws to cut back trees and brush to reach homes. And the storms threatened a region that includes portions of the country still reeling from deadly weekend weather. The Storm Prediction Center said up to 40 million people from Chicago, Indianapolis, Detroit to Memphis, Tennessee were at risk for storms later today, with the greatest threat from lower Michigan across the middle to lower Ohio River Valley and to the Mid-South. Storms were moving today across the Ozarks in northern Arkansas and southern Missouri, prompting tornado warnings. The National Weather Service said a tornado struck in Ballinger County in southeastern Missouri, and that was the one we just spoke about. Moving down here, the Missouri State Highway Patrol had earlier reported suspected tornado damage with a widespread debris field and some injuries in Ballinger County. Messages seeking more details on the overnight damage were left by the AP with the Missouri Highway Patrol and the County Sheriff's Office this morning. The storms come after severe weather and possibly dozens of tornadoes killed at least 32 people just days ago, meaning more potential misery for those whose homes were destroyed in Arkansas, Iowa, and Illinois. Or I would Expect maybe misery to those whose homes were not destroyed then, but are now. The fierce storms started last Friday and continued into the weekend. Had been spawning deadly tornadoes in 11 states as the system plodded through Arkansas and onto the South, Midwest, and Northeast. Schools in Little Rock were canceled today because the storms were expected to move through the metro during the morning rush hour. At least 2 tornadoes were confirmed yesterday in Illinois as storms targeted the state and eastern Iowa and southwest Wisconsin before nightfall. The National Weather Service issued tornado warnings in Iowa and Illinois last night and said a confirmed twister was spotted southwest of Chicago near Bryant, Illinois. Officials said another tornado touched down yesterday morning, Tuesday, in the western Illinois community of Kelowna. Local news reports showed wind damage to some businesses there. And this article goes on because this is a major weather system, so catch up on it as we now have to move into our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, all that is violent and beautiful. John Wick is back and arguably better than ever. Clocking in at nearly 3 hours, John Wick Chapter 4 is the longest and most globe-trotting of the series thus far, with action taking place in Japan, France, Germany, and of course, John's familiar stomping grounds, New York. No time is wasted picking up where Chapter 3 left off. With the bounty on his head growing exponentially, our favorite assassin learns there is a way to defeat the organization that put the hit on him, the shadowy, sinister High Table. But as you can imagine, it's not going to be easy. Familiar faces here include Keanu Reeves as the title character, Ian McShane as the always-in-control hotel manager, and the recently deceased Lance Reddick as the faithful concierge. There are some new players too, most notably Hong Kong kung fu luminary Donnie Yen as the blind assassin Kane, and Bill Skarsgård, a member of the High Table who happens to be a marquis, and like another famous marquis, Desaad, seems to take pleasure in tormenting people. This latest chapter fleshes out John's backstory a bit more, but it never bogs down with detail. A wise decision because it's the fight scenes and body count for which fans show up, and they won't be disappointed here. Chapter 4 delivers its fight scenes showing incredible choreography, set design, and cinematography that make this one jaw-droppingly beautiful at times. And for a film in its genre, it also wrestles with some surprisingly deep themes, including mortality, how we're remembered, and indeed the fortune of being remembered by anyone at all. While those questions remain, it's clear that John Wick 4 is an action movie you won't soon forget. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. When you think of pollinators, what comes to mind? Bees, butterflies, maybe hummingbirds? Well, how about flies?
Flies in general are the second most important group of pollinating insects. So I think that they deserve more credit than they often get.
C. Scott Clem is an insect ecologist at the University of Georgia, and he's been studying a type of fly known as a hoverfly. You may have actually seen them before, masquerading as bees and wasps.
They tend to be yellow and black colored, and they're kind of different from other flies in that regard. They're these little insects that you often find visiting flowers, or sometimes they'll actually land on your skin, seeking the salt on your skin.
By studying isotopes in the insect's legs and wings, Clem and his colleagues have now determined that some of these flies make a remarkable autumn migration. They seem to originate near Ontario, Canada, and then they fly hundreds of miles south to central Illinois. And it's possible that some go even further, thousands of miles perhaps.
They get up in high altitude air currents. They're able to just surf on these winds, basically, and it takes them these vast distances.
The results appear in the journal Ecological Monographs. As for why the flies migrate, well, Clem says they might be pursuing the aphids they eat southward, or maybe they're following the blooms of nectar-rich flowers.
And if they're moving, they could be moving these ecological services across the continent on an annual basis.
The scientists write that the flies could be transporting billions of grains of pollen across the continent, all while working to exterminate pests. So even if hoverflies' bee-like appearance is mere mimicry, the ecological services they provide could very well be the real deal. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Ready for our little forest adventure?
Yes! So much waiting for me. Yeah, I wanna go outside. I wanna be.
We're here.
Whoa, that was fast.
There's a forest closer than you think. Find a park or forest near you and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by USDA Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
In a mental health emergency, why are only the police called and not mental health professionals? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Recently, when 31-year-old Najee Seabrooks of Paterson, New Jersey, locked himself in a bathroom and was threatening to harm himself, claiming he had 3 knives and a gun, the police were called. As reported in the New York Times, during the hours-long ordeal that followed, with Seabrooks in a bathroom and the police outside the door, Seabrooks was texting members of a harm reduction collective that he had been working for. He asked for their help, saying, "I need to hear your voices. I need to see your faces." And Seabrooks' colleagues came to the apartment building and showed the messages to the police, but the police wouldn't let them participate. Rather, a police unit came with high-powered firearms and helmets. Seabrooks peeked out and saw them. Afterwards, the project director said, "Showing a gun to a person going through a mental health crisis like this only increases paranoia and fear." When Seabrooks exited the bathroom and lunged at the police with a knife, they said, "They shot him, and he died." The state attorney general's office is investigating. Hopefully, the investigation can address the question why in Paterson, like many cities and towns across the country, only armed police and not mental health professionals are called to respond to mental health emergencies. How does that make any sense? The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that the United Mine Workers of America called for a strike against the Pittston Coal Company. Negotiation with the miners who worked in Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky had drug on for 14 months. The company had canceled health care for retired miners, along with miners with disabilities and widows, and also was not paying previously agreed to payments into a retiree benefit fund. 2,000 miners walked out of the mines and onto the picket lines. The company brought in replacement workers. The union was committed to peaceful protest, but the strike also drew a large number of other miners to the cause who supported the strike in wildcat actions. As many as 40,000 wildcat miners walked the lines in support of the strike. Angered over the use of scab labor, some of these picketers participated in actions like using jack rocks, a line of nails welded together to puncture the tires of company vehicles. In all, 4,000 people were arrested during the strike. The strike stretched on from days to weeks to months. At the time of the strike, current AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka was president of the United Mine Workers. When a newspaper reporter asked him how long the workers could hold out on the strike, he responded, 1 day longer than Pittston. Many friends from labor came to Appalachia to support the strike, including famed farm labor activist Cesar Chavez. A nearby campground became known as Camp Solidarity as a base for these friends. Women supporters formed a group called the Daughters of Mother Jones and staged support actions, including a 36-hour sit-in at the Pittston coal headquarters. The strike ended in February of 1990, with the miners winning some, but not all, of their demands.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 37 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the low 50s, so a bit warmer. Or actually, they're saying it's nearly the same as yesterday, but it was actually, should be a bit warmer then. Overcast throughout the day. Well, overcast this morning with some rain coming in the late morning afternoon. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then cloudy this evening with showers throughout the night. Lows in the upper 30s, winds light and variable, and we should be getting close to a quarter inch of rain today and tonight. And then cloudy in the morning tomorrow with off and on rain showers throughout the day and night. Highs in the mid-50s, winds out of the southeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it also about a quarter inch of rain tomorrow and tomorrow evening. Pollen is still rated as none here in the town of Rogue River, but I don't believe it. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 22 parts per million, and I do believe that. The daytime UV index is moderate at level 5. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.26 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that's why it's known as the Weather Underground. London is 56 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 60 degrees and sunny. Rome is 50 with rain showers. Kyiv is 46 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 48 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 78 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 62 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 64 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 54 degrees Fahrenheit and in a haze after what happened yesterday. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Yamaguchi of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Images captured by a robotic probe inside one of the 3 melted reactors at Japan's wrecked Fukushima nuclear power plant showed exposed steel bars in the main supporting structure and part of its thick external concrete wall missing, triggering concerns about its earthquake resistance in case of another major disaster. The plant's operator, Tokyo Electric Power Company Holdings, we know it as TEPCO, has been sending robotic probes inside the Unit 1 primary containment chamber since last year. The new findings released yesterday, Tuesday, were from the latest probe conducted at the end of March. An underwater remotely operated vehicle named Rove A2 was sent inside the Unit 1 pedestal, a supporting structure right under the core. It came back with images seen for the first time since the earthquake and tsunami crippled the plant 12 years ago. The area inside the pedestal is where traces of the melted fuel can most likely be found. An approximately 5-minute video, part of the 39-hour-long images captured by the robot, showed that a 3.9-foot thick concrete exterior of the pedestal was significantly damaged near its bottom, exposing the steel reinforcement inside. TEPCO spokesperson Kiseko Matsuo told reporters that the steel reinforcement is largely intact, but the company plans to further analyze data and images over the next couple of months to find out if and how the reactor's earthquake resistance can be improved. The images of the exposed steel reinforcement have triggered concerns about the reactor's safety. About 880 tons of highly radioactive melted nuclear fuel remain inside the 3 reactors. Robotic probes have provided some information, but the status of the melted debris is still largely unknown. The amount is about 10 times the damaged fuel that was removed in the cleanup of the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant in the United States after its 1979 partial core meltdown.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Nicole Winfield of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Italy's infrastructure minister sought to rally international interest in Italy's latest attempt to build a bridge linking Sicily to the Italian mainland, a dream since the times of ancient Rome, which has been planned, discussed, and designed by a succession of Italian governments and never gotten off the ground. Matteo Salvini vowed that the €10 billion project, which was last definitively shelved in 2013, would create 100,000 jobs, accelerate transportation times, develop 2 long-neglected parts of southern Italy, and result in the biggest public works project in Europe this century. The cabinet last month approved a decree reviving the public company that last drafted plans for the bridge, allowing for the resumption of contract relationships with the concession company and general contractors. The proposed €6 mile-long suspension bridge linking Sicily's Messina and Reggio Calabria on the mainland has been an on-again, off-again dream of a succession of conservative governments, Benito Mussolini and Silvio Berlusconi among them, but has never materialized due to concerns about costs, earthquakes, the environmental impact, and fear of mafia involvement. Salvini, who is Transport and Infrastructure Minister in Premier Giorgio Meloni's hard right-led government, insisted those concerns were now resolved and that he hoped the bridge could be built by 2030. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.